Okay. Okay.
Hi, everyone. This is Carolyn Labrie. I am the founder of Mustard Seeds Wellness, Grief and Wellness Coaching, and I'm also the host of our Finding Your Way Forward program on Grief TV. And I wanted to invite my dear friend Robyn as my guest for this program tonight. Robyn is a hospice nurse. She is my essential oils partner and guru. She is so many things. And
Oh,
one of my most favorite things about Robyn is that she is just such an encourager and a lifter up of everyone around her. And she has really carried me through some rough stuff, and I just adore her. So
oh.
thank you, Robyn, for
I
being
adore you
willing to
right back.
chat.
You're welcome, and I adore you right back.
I know. Well, let's jump right in if you're ready.
Okay,
So
I'm ready.
tonight I want to talk to Robyn about grief, obviously, and I'm wanting to kind of pick her brain about her experience as a hospice nurse and also some of her own personal experiences with grief and see just what kind of insights we can find. So, why don't you, Robyn, tell me all about you? What do you do? How did you get into the work
Oh,
that you do? Tell me about everything, all the things.
I'll tell you all the things. Is everyone ready to buckle up and sit down for a few hours? I'm joking. I'm 100% joking. So I am by education, I'm a registered nurse. I have been for more than 30 years. I just say that because when you give the exact numbers, it ages you. So more than 30 years, I've been a registered nurse. And out of those 30, for the past more than 20, I've been doing hospice. And I got into hospice care. I was in long-term care. I was a director of nursing homes. And let's just say I had more of a passion to provide care that I was seeing not being provided. And I got
Yeah.
very close to the hospice workers. And one day they just said, you would make a great hospice nurse. And the rest is
Mhm.
history. So I started out in the field. I did that for a few years. I loved it more than I could have ever imagined. But my passion was managing. So I got into management, still maintained the patient relationships, the family relationships. But the reason I love management is because I love teaching.
Mm.
So I managed a team for a number of years for a couple different hospices. My husband and I were living in Florida. We moved back home to right outside of Philadelphia. And I've been with my current company for the past 15 years. And I'm in the role that I never said I would do, and that is marketing. You can call it sales, you can call it a liaison, you can call it a rep. And I never, ever thought I would want to do it because I always imagined these reps, these marketers, is all they do is go out to lunch, give stuff away. And I just never wanted to do that. But I love my role because if you ask my boss, my job is to get new business. And people are like, that's really morbid. Get new people that are dying. But it's more than
Mhm.
that. And we're going to get into that later about what hospice really is.
Yes.
In my opinion, my job is to educate people. So when they
Yep.
hear the word hospice, they're not thinking the next person walking through the door is going to be wearing a cape and carrying a sickle. It's more than that.
Yeah.
So I love educating about what hospice is, carrying people through the process of hearing those words that their loved one or themselves need hospice and having them understand that hospice is truly a gift.
Yeah.
So, in my in about the past 7 years, I have also been an avid essential oil person,
Mm.
wellness, natural products, plant-based products. And because I loved them so much and I couldn't stop talking about them and sharing them, I turned it into a business. So I do that alongside hospice. And in the wee hours of the morning is when I'm usually working my business. Carolyn knows that.
And talking to me.
And as if my time was not, and talking to you, yes, the only other person that's up, that I know if I message or like message pops up, I'm like, yay, someone's up with me. Um, and as if my time was already not consumed. I'm also a dog mom, a wife. I started being an event coordinator for a yoga studio and never did yoga. It's been in my life for about a year and a half now. The event coordinator, that just kind of fell into place as I started planning essential oil classes and we developed aroma yoga. And so now we do workshops, all kinds of wellness and health workshops, some things unrelated to oils altogether. Um, so yeah, that's me. Mhm.
Super full life. And I was thinking when you were talking about the marketing that it literally is. It's education. That's what it is. You're educating providers, you're
Right.
educating family members. That's what you do. And it's really a
Correct.
gift. It's a gift. It's a very fulfilling role to have. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for sharing.
I love it.
And
I love my job. You're
and I'm
welcome.
sure I have not seen you do your hospice job, but I have seen you do your oils work, and you are an educator extraordinaire, and you're definitely doing what you were meant to do for sure in that role.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
yeah. So as a hospice nurse, what are some insights that you can share with us about loss and grief that you've kind of collected over all these years in hospice?
So I think the biggest thing is that I've seen is that grief is very individual. And no one should be or wants to be judged on how they grieve.
Yeah.
Some people, and I've seen young people lose spouses. I've seen people lose children. And this is not just in the hospice realm, but this is in life itself.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I had a friend I was talking today who lost her 12-year-old child to suicide. It's been a few years. Um, and she reached out to me because her and I have had many conversations because people tell her, I can't believe you still talk about him. And she always reaches out to me when she gets those cruel messages. So I think the biggest thing that I've learned is grief is very individual and
Mhm.
you can't judge how someone else is grieving or who they're
Mhm.
grieving over.
Mhm.
One of my hardest losses, I've lost both my parents. There is a fly. He's like roaming around because we left the door open too long for Bailey to come in. One of the two of the hardest losses I've had in my life were the loss of dogs.
Yeah.
Um, when I lost my first dog, I was debilitated,
Yeah.
and could not function and couldn't see past that darkness.
Yeah.
And most recently, 2.5 years ago, losing our second dog was debilitating and it was a
Yeah.
physical pain. I never felt with all the losses, the human losses, my mother, my father, friends, um, I never felt a physical pain. So with grief and with loss, you have to close your own voice inside your head when you're helping someone walk through that path.
Yeah.
Um, no matter how well you prepare for it, it still takes your breath away. Carolyn, I was with Carolyn as she walked the path with her mom, and dementia. And with all of Carolyn's education and her knowledge and her experience and what she does, and reading her posts and having chats with her, I would think, well, this is a lady who's well prepared. But when that moment hits, it's
Mhm.
a tidal wave.
Yep.
Um, so I think, and people grieve differently. Sometimes there's delayed grief. There's
Yes.
anticipated grief. I mean, we can do a whole segment on the types of grief there is.
Yes.
There's complicated grief.
Yep.
Here in Philly, I think this happened. I don't remember if it happened in Philly or Jersey a couple months ago, where a well-known hockey player and his brother were killed while riding bikes.
Oh yeah, I
And
remember
I
that.
just
Yeah.
couldn't, and it was the day before their sister's wedding.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring it up is because that's complicated. And there were
Right.
people like, well, did she get married? Well, no, she didn't get married. Could she ever get married? Does that bring up like planning another wedding? Does that bring this up? And then there's the parents that lost two children, and one of the
Yes.
guy's wife was pregnant, and
Yeah.
seven. So there's complicated grief. So um, the one thing I always tell people is you can sympathize, like if you know the difference between sympathy and empathy, you
Hmm.
can sympathize with people
Hmm.
over a loss, but you really can never empathize because you've never been there.
Right.
Yes, a mother who has lost a child can talk to another mother who has lost a child, but there's
Yes.
still the individual of it. So
Yeah.
between grief and loss, um, it's what the person perceives it
Yeah.
to be.
Yes. Yes.
So,
And for sure. And you're absolutely right. It is such an individual journey, and it's very painful sometimes. I mean, I just passed the 4-year mark of my mom's passing, and I even find myself criticizing myself at times. Like,
4 years.
4 years. I know, May 1st was 4 years.
I,
And
I,
yeah, where has it gone?
what,
And yep. And I find myself kind of beating myself up sometimes because I'm like, why do I still struggle? It's been 4 years. Like, why do I still have just really bad days? Why do I, you know, still need her so deeply? Like, have I not just grasped finally that she's gone? But I think you're always going to need your people, and you're always going to need your pets, and you are. There's no getting around it. And there's no shame in that. It's just
right.
learning how to kind of grow around it and kind of move forward, kind of carrying that in a
You
healthy
know,
way. Does
and
that make sense?
it does. And I think what happens, like there's what was her first name? Kubler-Ross did the
Yeah. Elizabeth.
stages,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know, and
Hmm.
you go between the stages. Um, but the one thing is like I'm sitting here thinking like, wait, no, Carolyn, don't beat yourself up because
Hmm.
what I find, and I know this is going to be a really weird analogy, okay, very weird analogy, but I quit smoking 18 months ago, 19 months ago. And when I first quit, I
That's
remember the
huge.
cravings,
Yeah.
and the cravings would last hours. And
Yes.
no matter what I did, I was still craving it. I was fighting the cravings, but they would last hours and I would be obsessed. I'd be driving and every other person in every other car was smoking. Or
Hmm.
I'd get out of my car and there were cigarettes on the ground. And I would smell smoke all the time. The cravings consumed me.
Hmm.
As time went on, I would still crave it, but they started going away like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right? It
Yep.
didn't consume me.
Yep.
And do I still, yeah, every now and then, like after a good meal or a nice cup of coffee sitting outside, yeah, I think
Yep.
about, having a cigarette. So the way I relate that to grief is when we'll use your mom and you, when your mom first died, those moments were closer together, those moments
Yes.
of breaking down, those moments of anger, those moments of pain, those moments of, I need you back, mom. I didn't say this
Mhm.
to you, mom. Those moments were like, 75 times an hour, say.
Yep.
Now they're more spread out and you're able to rein it in a little bit more. So I
Yes.
think over time, it's never going to go away.
Yeah.
It's never going to go away. There's
Yeah.
always going to be her birthday. There's always going to be her favorite
Mhm.
holiday. There's always going to be a smell that wafts in front of your nose that reminds
Mhm.
you of her. There's always going to be, you're going to come across a scarf, or there's always going to be that. We're human,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
I've
I mean,
almost
it's
I, I've almost started to look on those moments. They used to really make me sad, but I think with the passage of time, in the spaces between the sadness, like if I come across something like that, or if something happens, I get really joyful about it because it's such a gift, you
right.
know? Like
It
it keeps
really
her
is.
here, it keeps us connected. And I feel like that's almost her way of trying to stay connected too.
Right. It is. And it's her message to you.
Yeah.
Same with, people believe it or they don't, but when you see cardinals, you find pennies, you find feathers, all of those things. It's like,
Yeah.
hmm,
Mhm.
you know, I saw a
Yeah.
cardinal in the most bizarre, bizarre place the other day. I'm like looking up, and why I was even looking, it was like this between these foam poles at the top, and I'm like, is that a cardinal? And I'm just staring at it, and it flew away, and I'm like, it was either my dad or Max. I'm not sure. It was
Mhm.
one or the other. It wasn't my mom. I know it wasn't my mom, but something came over me, and I knew it
Mhm.
was either my dad or Max.
Yeah.
So,
It's such a gift.
hmm
Oh, well, speaking of your own personal losses, you've mentioned a few of them, and I wondered if you'd be comfortable sharing anything about how you've dealt with your personal losses.
yeah. Um, I won't talk about my dogs only because that'll take me down a completely different path that I
That's
don't
fine.
want tonight to be.
That's
But
fine.
I'm going to talk about both my parents.
Hmm.
And as a hospice nurse, and as just a nurse, it
Yep.
doesn't make it easier. It actually
Nope.
made it harder.
Yep.
So when my father was passed, so my father was diagnosed in November. It's been 6 or 7 years um, with cancer, and he was in Florida. And he called me, and he told me and my sister he didn't want us coming down, and we respected that.
Mm.
And my stepmom called me just almost a month later and said, we just sent your dad, I just sent your dad to the hospital, 911, he's unresponsive. And my sister and I quickly got to Florida. And by the time we got there, my dad was on life support.
Mm.
And that into itself was something that's just struck a chord because I knew my father wouldn't want that. And um, it was the middle of the night. My sister and I landed. She lives in New York. We met in Tampa and took an Uber to the hospital, met my stepmom, and we're sitting in a conference room in the middle of the night. There's no staff there. We got special permission to be allowed to be in. And they said they would call the doctor on call, and the doctor on call. And I'm sitting there listening as they're telling me what happened. My dad had cancer and it spread. And um, I kept saying to them, like, my dad did not want to be on life support. And my stepmom says, well, unfortunately, like I didn't get to tell them that. And 911 came and it was all done like in the ambulance and on and on. And she couldn't find his living will. And um, I kept saying in the back of my mind, like there was all this noise in the back of my head saying, like looking at the doctor and saying, why are you bringing up hospice right now? Like, why are we even having this conversation of how
Hmm.
long my father could be like this? Why are you not saying hospice? And I was exhausted, number one. And then there was, like the devil and an angel on your shoulder. They were similar in that I was like, why should I have to bring it up? I don't want to bring it up. I want to be the daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, my sister and I, we went back to my dad's house with my stepmom and we went to bed and, we woke up fresh and we went to breakfast. And I just said to both of them, I said, I guess I'm going to be the one who has to bring up hospice.
Yeah.
And my sister and my stepmom were like, well, it's all up to you. Like, you discuss them. We don't really know. And I'm like, I'm the little sister. I'm the baby. Like, I'm daddy's little girl and I don't
Yeah.
want this role. So, to kind of take a long story short, I did have to do that. I did have to say, like, well, what about hospice?
Yep.
And they said, well, if we put him on hospice, um, we'd have to extubate him and we'd have to need to go to a hospice house. I'm like, that's what we want. Like, can we please just make all this happen so I could be with my father and be the daughter?
Yeah.
And, it finally happened. And I will tell you that I guess now is as good a time as any to talk about the soul and spirit of dying.
Mhm.
Um, we got my dad to the hospice house, and my sister had to leave, but I kept changing my flight and changing my flight. And finally, um, days later, when I basically like ran out of underwear, that's kind of how I make the joke.
Right.
I was like, all right, I know this. I know this from experience. My father is not going to die while I'm here.
Mhm.
He wants me to go home. He
Mhm.
wants me to be safe. He was unresponsive, but I knew this. I've seen it countless number of times. People wait for someone to arrive, they wait for someone to leave. So I went home. My sister and I were 2 years apart. As children, we never fought, surprisingly enough, never.
Mhm.
And when I called her and I got home, we got into a fight over the phone. It was like the first time we fought. And she got so angry with me over something so stupid, irrelevant now, and she hung up on me. And I kept trying to call her back, and she wouldn't answer the phone. And I'm like, and finally she called me back. She goes, "Okay, I was wrong. I understand where you're coming from." And I'm like, "Let's just kiss and make up." And with that, she said, "Hold on a second. Our house phone is ringing." And I said, "Well, this is weird because my work phone is ringing." And she went to pick up the house phone, and I went to pick up the work phone. And the work phone, it was the hospice house. They had both my numbers. And is this Robyn? And my father had just passed.
Wow.
And I'm so convinced that my father was not going to pass away if my sister and I were fighting.
Hmm.
Because again, that's complicated grief. Like, what are we
Hmm.
going to now come together and forget that we were fighting? So, yeah, and that was my sister. I used to tell her these stories, and I remember her calling me a couple days later and saying, "Did Daddy do that?" I said, "Daddy did that.
Hmm.
Daddy, made it so we can make up." So, um, I grieved my dad bad. I was Daddy's little girl. He was my
Hmm.
hero. Um, and um, I grieved him bad. But I knew that he would be so disappointed in me if I wasn't strong.
Yeah.
So that's actually what made me strong.
Yeah.
Um, and I was so proud and so happy to do his eulogy. Like it was my final, like, aren't you proud of me, Daddy? Because that's what I strove for all the time is for my father to be proud of me. Um, so I think, in telling my story with that, I think people need to realize that um, even as a professional, and Carolyn will tell you the same thing, like she deals with us, right? But even as a professional, it's okay to not want to be the professional.
Yeah.
Um, when my mom got sick, my mom's journey was unexpected. She fell in January, broke her hip, went for surgery, came out of the surgery, and this is in the height of COVID, or
Yeah.
towards the end of COVID, 2 years after COVID started, really. Um, was gone to a nursing home for rehab and just gave up.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to do rehab. She was angry. And my mom and I already had a strained relationship. She was angry at me because I was making all these decisions and then
Yes.
I wouldn't let her go home. Well, she couldn't go home. It was very complicated. Carolyn, you remember all that.
I
And
do.
all I wanted to do was just be the daughter and
Hmm.
just heal the relationship with my mother.
Yes.
So, with that being
Yes.
said, I actually brought up to the nursing home once again. I think it's time for hospice. And because I was friends with the director of nursing and all of the staff, she was like, "God, we're so relieved. We didn't want to bring this up to you." And I'm like, "No, let's do this."
Yeah.
Um, And my mom died shortly after, and she was on our hospice, my hospice team. And I remember our social worker, our chaplain, our nurse, when I would ask questions, I wasn't asking as a daughter. I was asking as like the hospice nurse or like the hospice manager. And they kept saying
Mhm.
to me, Robyn, you're a family member. You're not our
Mhm.
coworker. You're not our team member. You're
Yeah.
our, you're a family member.
Yes.
So again, whether you're in healthcare, you're in any related profession, when it comes time for hospice, end of life, or whatever it is, be the family.
Yes.
Don't be the professional. The
Yeah.
professionals are there for you. Be the family. So I
Thank
think I
you
went
so
off on a
much.
complete tangent, but
No, no. Thank you so much for sharing because it's it's not easy. It's not easy to share this stuff,
it's not.
and it's I really appreciate it. I want this program to be something that people can kind of stumble upon in the middle of the night when they're feeling terrible, when they're grieving, and they just want to feel connected, and conversations like this encourage that connection, and help people to feel less isolated.
Yes.
So as difficult as it is, I really appreciate you being willing to share those experiences
I
with
would
your
do anything for
parents.
you, and this
I
is
know
this is a perfect subject for you and I to talk about.
it
We
is.
just have
It
to
is.
promise we won't talk about this stuff when we're together in July,
Oh,
because Elaine will probably hit
no,
us both.
no, we're just gonna have fun when we see each other in July. But I want to speak on that point you brought up about being the daughter, being the family member.
Hmm.
Similar things would happen to me, particularly with my mom. My mom had such bad co-occurring mental health stuff going on with her dementia, and she was having delusions and hallucinations. And staff used to call me in the middle of the night when she was in assisted living, like, hey, can you talk to your mom? Can you redirect her? And I'm like, because they know my background and they know that I can do those things. And, in an emergency, sure. But a lot of the time I would say just that. I'm her daughter. I'm not her therapist. This is not my role in
Right,
this situation. I'm her advocate. I'm gonna advocate for her. I'm gonna get her what she needs, but I shouldn't be the one doing the work, you know. I should be
right,
supporting her, not being her therapist, or being her nurse or
correct.
all these different things. So it is really important, but it's also it's very, very difficult. And, for me being the only child, in some ways it was like a blessing because I didn't have to run anything by anyone and I didn't have to fight with anyone. I could just make the decisions, just like get it
Right,
done. But at the same time, it's a heavy load to carry. And I know you know this, even with your
right.
sister. It's a heavy, heavy
Well, my
load.
sister was like, "Do you make all the decisions?" And I'm like, "Do
Yeah.
something, like do
Right.
something
Like
to help me." So
anything.
yeah, it is. It's
Right.
a heavy
Yeah.
load.
Yeah. It's a very heavy load. And you can't put more of a load on yourself by taking on roles that aren't yours, you know, and that's part
Right,
of advocating for your loved one, but also advocating for yourself in that process and saying, like, no, I need the space to grieve and I need the space to be the family member. So let me have
right.
that.
I
Thank you
need
for
it for
bringing,
me. Yeah,
yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's a really important
you're
thing that I
welcome.
think people get lost in it. It's so easy to get lost and overwhelmed in it. So that's a good reminder. Um, so my next question is you can speak more on it if you'd like, but I feel like you've covered some of this already, but some things that you can share that you have found to be helpful when navigating loss and grief. Anything that you can think of that you haven't already shared with us.
Do you know the one thing I haven't, and when I was looking at your questions ahead of time, is it's okay not to say anything. And that's
Mm-hmm.
for the person grieving,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're
Mm-hmm.
going to see them. Okay. You're going to
Right.
see a friend who has a loss. And I can't tell you the number of times people have been like, well, I don't know what to say. Like, don't say anything.
Just be
Don't
there. Just
say,
show
don't say
up.
I'm
Show
sorry. You
up.
don't have to say I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just be there.
Yeah.
Ask them if they want to hold hands.
Yeah.
Boy, boy, girl, girl, boy, girl, husband, whatever it is.
Yep.
Ask them if they want to hold hands. Ask them if they want to hug. Just hug it out. Just sit in silence.
Hmm.
Look at a picture book. Look at photo albums. Help them put, one of the best things someone did for me, um, when my mom died, my friend Stephanie, I was collecting pictures and she called me to do something. And I said, oh, I got to go get poster board. I got to make the thing for my mom's memorial. And she goes, do you want me to help you make it? And I was like, that was really very nice
Very
because I
thoughtful.
didn't have anyone to help me. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so we ended up making two of them. And, so just cook a meal for I'm talking from the perspective of what to do when
Hmm.
you have a friend that had a loss, like things
Yes.
that people don't know because no one teaches people how to be for someone when they have a loss. So cook a meal,
Yep.
offer your presence, offer a hug, sit in
Yes.
silence. Don't say anything because you know what? If you think you're going to say something wrong, you probably are.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Just just
I
be.
don't
Hmm.
like the words they're better off. I hate like they're better off. Like, what does better off mean?
Right.
So and navigating your own grief and loss is don't hold it in
Right.
because
Yeah.
and I know like
Yep.
holding in grief, holding in loss, holding in anger, all of those things will physically make you sick.
It
So
will.
let it out. Go to the forest and scream.
Yep.
um, go to a gym and punch a punching bag. Go do something to release it,
Yes.
but don't hold it in. Find your safe person to talk
Yes.
to. Um, when my mom died again, we had a very strained relationship, and it was healed by me caring for her at her end of
Hmm.
life and doing all the things that needed to be done. Um, and I said to my husband one day, I'm like, I'm still angry at myself that it took her sickness to make things better. And
Hmm.
he's like, it's okay to be angry with yourself,
Hmm.
so just not holding
Yep.
it in. And find your safe person. Find your safe person.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Two things I'd like to add. I think, when my mom died, it was very unexpected. It was very traumatic. And I had to go to her facility and I had to go into her room, which was just as she left it because she had no expectation that she wasn't going to be going home to her room.
Right.
So everything was just as she left it. I mean, like, and my friend Robert, Robert who had the bulldog, whose mom was a very close friend of my mom's, Pilar was his mom's name. He just met me there and he brought some really big bags and I sat on her bed and I was like just paralyzed. I was just staring at her stuff. I mean, I couldn't move. I knew I had to because I had to clear things out, but I couldn't do it. And he literally just took all these bags and he was like, okay, you know, what's going on here? What's going on here? What do we need? And then he packed it all up. He took such care with her things. I mean,
Mhm.
he just showed up. He was just there, you know.
Who is your person?
He was my person. He took me to Tropical Smoothie Cafe after we had a smoothie. I mean, like just normal stuff, but it was so profound that that's exactly what I needed. I would not have
Hmm.
been able to do that. And I didn't know that I wasn't going to be able to do it because I had pretty much shouldered everything else. So like I
Right.
figured, okay, well, I'm just going to have to do it and I'm just going to have to get through it. I didn't realize that when I got there, it was just gonna flatten me. I didn't know that I needed help and I did. I just, I didn't
And
know how to
no
ask
matter
for
how
it.
well we prepare,
Right.
Well, that's the
right?
other thing is, and we, no matter how
Hmm.
well we prepare and we hear it all the time in hospice, I'm ready. I'm ready. I know she's
Yes.
dying. I'm ready.
Yeah.
When the moment happens, you just don't know. You don't know
No,
what's going to happen.
no. And
Um,
you're not ready. You're never ready. You're never ready.
yeah, I still remember exactly where I was when they called me about my
Yep.
mom. I had just
Yep.
left hours before, and yeah, so
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whew.
Well, I would like to give us both some love for the sharing of those hard things because
Yes,
it brings up a lot. And,
it does.
you know, it's just tough.
Can I just real quick, and I think this was one of your questions. I don't know if we were going to get to it or not, but I just want to, for anyone, like you said, who stumbles across this in the middle of the night, and is like, what is this grief TV? And wait, who are these two ladies that are chatting? Um, and you got to the end, you got to where you are right now. Thank you. Thank you. Um, and if you haven't had the experience or I don't know if you would call it an experience, but if you've never been faced with a physician or a nurse telling you your loved one needs hospice,
Hmm.
um, let me tell you, hospice is not about death and dying. It is about living. It's about quality at the end of your life.
Yeah.
It's about dignity and it's about comfort. And when people hear the word comfort, they think, oh no, I definitely don't want them to be in pain. Comfort and pain are more than just physical, they are
Hmm.
emotional, they are
That's right.
spiritual. Um, and hospice as a team helps you through that whole journey. The nurse is going to make sure that the comfort level of physical pain is there. The
Hmm.
chaplain, the social worker, very often the aide are going to help you through that emotional discomfort, that emotional pain for you and for your loved one. Some people are like, they're people with Lou Gehrig's disease is for some reason comes to mind and they're on hospice. They know they're dying,
Yeah.
but they're not ready. They think they have so much unfinished business.
Hmm.
Or people, they're ready. They're emotionally ready, but their loved ones are clinging on. That's a whole nother conversation is about,
Hmm.
giving someone permission to die
Yeah.
even though you're not going to be okay, having them hear that you will be okay is so vital. So
Yes.
for anyone stumbling across this or choosing to watch this
Hmm.
that is totally shook by hearing the words hospice or doesn't fully understand what hospice is, Carolyn's contact information is obviously attached to all of this, and
Hmm.
she could put you in touch with me because that's my number one I don't like to say it as a goal, but my number one thing about being in hospice care is having people understand what hospice is
Yes.
and what it isn't. And the number one
Yes.
thing it is not just about death and dying. It is a gift that you give to yourself, to your loved
Yes.
one. And it's the most ill-perceived part of healthcare that there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I both of my parents were on hospice at the end. Um, Actually, my mom came off hospice, interestingly, but my dad was on it right up into the end. And the word that comes to mind when I think of both of their hospice experiences is dignity, dignity,
mhm.
and love.
Yeah,
Because the love that
so important.
the hospice staff gave to both of my parents and to me was immeasurable. And just
Right.
having someone there who can fill kind of those roles that you were saying, like the chaplain, the nurse, the aide. I mean, they all have their own function, but they all carry out their functions in such a loving way. And that um, was priceless, priceless experience.
Unlike other forms of healthcare,
Mm,
you go get your blood taken, and the phlebotomist, this happened to me last week, is why I'm saying it, is like a real jerk. She hates her job. She doesn't want to be there. Like you
yeah,
totally sense it, right?
yeah,
But she's going to show up to her job every single day because all she has to do is stab people and take their blood. um, the nurse that's passing the meds on the hospital floor, the regular med surge, she hates her job. She can't wait to get home and be done for the day, but she's going to show up every day and do her job, and she doesn't really care.
yeah,
Um, Hospice workers, it takes a very special person to be a hospice worker. And
yes,
I don't know what, and again, been doing this for more than 20 years, been in the management end of it, hired and fired people. Hospice workers don't stay if they don't like it. You either
hmm,
are a hospice worker or you're not. And if
yes,
you're not, you will leave because it is not easy work. It's
no,
highly emotional work. We do get attached to our patients. We do
of
get attached to our
course.
families.
Hmm.
Um, I still have families that I talk to many, many years later. So,
Yes.
um, yeah.
Mm. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Oh God, for hours. Do we have the rest of the evening? Can I go get a snack? No, again, anyone that stumbles across it, knows Carolyn, is working with Carolyn, and ever wants to have a talk about hospice one-on-one,
Yes.
to understand it more, I am more than willing. My husband, I will end with kind of a joke, not joke, but my husband, if we're in social situations that are his, and he introduces me to someone and they say, "Oh, Robyn, what do you do?" He kind of jokes and it's like, "Unless you have 3 hours, don't talk to her." Because you can't do the elevator speech of hospice.
No,
And
because it doesn't
I get
exist.
very passionate about it,
Right.
and no, we do not hasten death and all of that stuff. So yeah, I could talk about hospice forever.
Well, we'll have to have
So
you back. We will have you back and we'll go through all the
okay,
things you want to talk about. We'll talk about all those intricate pieces of grief, like you mentioned, like the complicated and the anticipatory and all of it.
I
We'll
would
have a
love
whole
to.
series. But thank you again for doing this.
You're welcome.
And I
You're
love you so
welcome.
much. And I can't wait to
And I'm
see you in
sure we'll chat
July.
early in the morning. I love you.
Yes. Thank
I
you,
love you.
Robyn.
Have a
Thank you, everyone,
wonderful
for
evening.
watching. Bye.